Thank you, Madam Chair. I share some of the same concerns Senator Lang was talking about. So members, what this bill does is it says the union groups are going to be decided only by the executive branch, by the governor and his appointee as MMB commissioner. But the non-union groups, the compensation plans that now come before the Subcommittee on Employer Relations also, and the salaries that are also determined or approved by the legislature, as are the compensation plans currently, and was pointed out earlier by testimony, the union agreements. So this only simply treats the union contracts differently. And that's what we have in the bill. It seems really inconsistent. I know I'm, as many might expect, opposed to the notion of the people of Minnesota not having the oversight through their elected legislators. And we heard the union members or union bosses up here talking about how inconvenient that was. Oversight is something that's very important. And obviously, they have the votes to do this now, and they're going to come in and they're going to take it. And that's what we have before us in the bill. I have a question, Madam Chair, for the author of the bill, and that is Senator Murphy. Madam Chair, what happens in the future? I mean, this bill goes into effect. The unions get their way. They got a governor who gives them a 10% raise or whatever that future governor gives them. What happens when you have a budget scenario, budget realities of the people of Minnesota and a legislature that understands them, that says, you know what, we don't have the money to pay for that? What happens?
Senator Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Senator Drazkowski. As Mr. Bruce has already talked about, these negotiated contracts work within what has already been appropriated. And so I would like Mr. Bruce to talk a little bit more because he has been the one participating in this process. But it is, and I have Mr. Bone with us as well. So we have, as legislators, the authority to appropriate. That is one of our primary powers, and we have to do that job. As I understand it, and I think before I testify further about the process, I'm going to look to Mr. Bruce just to make sure, because these contract negotiations and their timing, we just had a bill before us last week where the contract's already in place, and we're moving it through. So the timing is confusing. So I'm going to turn to Mr. Bruce and Mr. Bone to make sure that we are being very clear here on the record.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Senator Drazkowski, I wanted to first go back to the other point about treating these, the compensation and salary plans differently than the collective bargaining agreements, is that under current law, the legislature and the Subcommittee on Employee Relations already has the authority to modify those contracts, whereas under collective bargaining agreements and arbitration awards, they don't. And so they're already treated differently under law. And so for expeditious sake and also preserving some of the authority that you have over the highest paid, highest seated employees in the executive branch, we didn't take them along with us in this bill. To your second question on the appropriation amounts is that if the negotiated agreements exceed what the what has been appropriated, that generally isn't part of the calculus when MMB comes to the table. And I didn't see anybody from MMB, but I can assure you that the 10% raises is not usually something that they bring along to the table. A boss is always a boss. A manager is always a manager, and they do have a fiduciary obligation to negotiate those contracts within the budget parameters that are set by the budget year. And so we trust the process. We work through it. We come to an agreement, and then it's approved. If there are cost overruns, as I mentioned before, they come to the legislature asking for money and you say no. That's simply the process. If the salary agreements exceed any type of reasonable expectation, we are able to also sign an MOU to reduce it. We have a lot of tools at our disposal to help address staffing issues, compensation issues, and this is just one of those that we already negotiate with our employer. But you control the purse strings. This is not taking that away.
Thank you, Mr. Bruce.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senator Drazkowski, I want to talk about this because it's something that we have been dealing with in the public state higher education institutions for many years, about 2 decades, in fact. I don't want to discount that we go into negotiations knowing what our campuses have, what the system has, based on what the legislature gave, based on enrollment numbers and all the different variables. In the last 13 years, our organization has taken a pay freeze for 4 of those. And not just out of the goodness of our hearts, but also to protect the institutions, because the money has not existed. The legislature has systematically disinvested in higher education over the last 20 years. We have 500 fewer faculty right now than we did in 2017, and it's because of cuts. Because we have a contract, we try to do the best that we can to provide a positive outcome for our members, but take into context the reality of the budget numbers. And so we have taken, our organization and other in-state organizations have taken less money than some of our union colleagues, simply to protect campus budgets. So, and I would imagine that Mr. Bruce would feel the same about his membership and their awareness of the realities of the budgets that we face every negotiation period. So it is not something that we are coming looking for a big cash grab for our members and putting the state in a situation where they can't pay for it. Because what that means to us is more cuts, fewer positions, fewer student support services, fewer opportunities for students to succeed in general.
Thank you for your testimony.
Well, Madam Chair,
Senator Drazkowski?
thank you. Well, I appreciate the commentary. I don't know if I completely align on that. The reality is, under the current system we have now, we've seen multiple biennia where the legislature sets their budget in the first year of the biennium for the 2 years. The compensation or the union contracts come back, are either passed, sometimes even not ratified yet in the process, but sometimes they are ratified. And then, guess what? They don't line up. The amount of the union agreements arrives at an amount that's greater than the legislature appropriated. And then they come back for a supplemental budget. And they ask for supplemental appropriations in those agency areas in the second year of the biennium. That has happened multiple times, members, while I've been in the legislature. So this even happens while we have the purview of these contracts in front of us in the legislature. Members, I can't imagine what type of conflicting situation is going to evolve if this passes into law, where the executive branch has this sole discretion. And as I mentioned, we're going to create some impasses of some sort here that are going to be much more difficult than we have today. And the reality is, I understand the unions. This is inconvenient. This is, you know, our members are confused. Well, you know what? So are the compensation plans. So are the salary plans that we have. Same thing. Same argument would apply to them, but you're the unions and they're not. And that's the reality of the situation, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I've got an amendment too. It's the A12 amendment. If I could offer that once it gets passed out.
The A12 amendment is offered.
And Madam Chair, I'll describe the amendment while it's being passed out. Another thing that really a great deal, members, concerns me, Madam Chair, is that these unions that are here at the table today asking Senator Murphy to bring this bill forward and bringing it before us today, attempting to change law to remove the oversight that the people currently have through their elected members of the Minnesota House and Minnesota Senate. That oversight would be removed in the bill. And these same unions contribute millions of dollars. As a matter of fact, I've added it up to the current party in control, the Democrat Party, in the throughout the state of Minnesota. 5 of these unions, 3 or 4 of which testified before us today, have contributed, just to my back of the napkin math, over $2 million to Democrats. The IFO that testified before us, and they give to members, legislative candidates as well, including Senator Gustafson received $1,000, Senator Mayquade $500, Senator Mitchell $1,000. Those are some of the legislators and others. But that particular organization, the IFO, contributed $32,500 to Democrat Party units in the state, as well as $32,500. Members, the MAPE PAC, which also testified before us in support of this bill to take away the oversight that the people expect us to provide on their behalf, contributed $500 to Senator Mayquade, $1,000 to Senator Mitchell, $1,000 to the author of the bill, Senator Murphy, and also another $45,250 to Democrat Party units throughout the state of Minnesota, none to the Republican Party units in either of those cases. And also the Minnesota Nurses Association, which was not before us today, and certainly these numbers will be bigger than the 2.031 million that I added up on my napkin. But they contributed $250 to Senator Carlson, sorry, Senator, 1,000 to
Senator Drazkowski, can you state the content of the bill and the amendment? Right now, it just seems like we're reading lists.
Yes, I'm just trying to demonstrate the breadth, Madam Chair, with which these unions have contributed to different candidates, and in this case, members. 500 to Senator Mayquade.
Okay, but I think we've made that point, Senator Drazkowski. Like,
okay,
we're just reading lists now.
I'll just give the totals to the party units, Madam Chair. Minnesota Nurses to the party units gave in the last election $302,458. The SIEU to those same party units, Democrat Party units, $967,879. And AFSCME, which did also testify before us in support of this bill, Madam Chair, too, again, all of these are Democrat Party units, $683,333. None to Republican Party units in all of those. So, Madam Chair, I'm concerned we have now a Democrat in the governor's office. We have these unions that seem to align very, 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 very perfectly with the Democrats in the state. And this amendment, Madam Chair, would provide that a labor organization could not make a contribution of sorts of, and the sorts are outlined in the amendment, to the governor or the lieutenant governor. Realize, Madam Chair, members, the governor and the lieutenant governor have full control under this bill over these decisions that include hundreds of millions of dollars of the people's money and the salaries of 35,000 or more employees in the state of Minnesota. And I didn't outline, Madam Chair, the amounts that that Governor Walz was given by these organizations in the last election, but he was thousands and thousands of dollars. It also provides that a political party unit that receives contributions from these same unions that, Madam Chair, receive their money from the original source being taxpayer money, that these dollars that the unions then contribute to the party units could not be used to benefit the governor or lieutenant governor in their election going forward. And that's the amendment, Madam Chair. I think this makes certain that we don't have pay-to-play type situation going on in the state of Minnesota. It's a concern I have with the language we see before us. We need to make certain in a government that's lacked a great deal of integrity. I've talked about the Feeding Our Future program,
Senator Drazkowski, I think we're getting far afield from what is in this amendment when
Yeah,
we're off on feeding our future.
Yeah, I think, Madam Chair, it's normal for members to be able to talk about every angle of their amendment, and I'm going to continue to do that because that's what we do here. So our government already has a high level of corruption. It's been noted, it's ongoing, it's large, it's not being controlled, and we're adding potential for more corruption here. And what this amendment does, members, Madam Chair and Madam Chair, is provides some safeguards for the people of Minnesota, the people that pay the bills.
Senator Drazkowski, did you previously, Senator Murphy is the chief author of this bill, have you previously addressed this to her, or is this the first time she's hearing about this?
This is the first time, Madam Chair, as every amendment before us today has been as well. So what this does, Madam Chair, is that it provides some security for the taxpayers of this state that they are not going to be victims yet again of corruption that we have that seems to be pervasive in this state government. So I'd encourage your adoption. As for roll call, Madam Chair.
We will